All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Drought Task Force. I am going to have, I'm looking at the list. I feel like, hello, Kristen. Hello, Supervisor Kimmelshoe. Hopefully you guys didn't want to remain anonymous. I'm going to have Autumn do just kind of a quick roll call of those that are on the Drought Task Force. Autumn, do you have a list in front of you, whether it's the department or somebody representing the department that they're coming from?
I do.
Okay.
Cami Loser.
I am here.
Josh Jimmerfield.
Present.
Ernie Washington is absent. Casey Hatcher. Josh Pack. Elaine McSpadden. Or someone from her office.
Yeah, this is Nick Ostrowski here with Environmental Health, covering for Elaine.
Louis Mendoza.
Yes, I am here.
Luisa Espino. Garrett Sejorland. I'm not quite sure how to say that, or someone from the Department of Forestry or CAL FIRE.
That's Sholand.
Okay.
Yep, I don't see him on here.
Dan Taverner. Tad Walker. That is it.
All right, thanks, Autumn. So today we just have a really short agenda with our primary focus on the drought impacts analysis study recommendations that we'll be making to the Board of Supervisors. And then I just had a category for all of the reports, other reports and updates for anyone from the other departments or representatives here, if they wanted to share anything. And then the public, if they are wishing to address the Drought Task Force on issues not listed on the agenda, and then our next meeting dates. And we have also finally gotten to a point of scheduling some regular Drought Task Force meetings dates on the calendar. So I'm just going to jump right in. As a reminder, if anyone does have any questions or anything, if you're on the panel, you can speak up at any time. And then attendees, oh, there's Danette, she just hopped on. Any attendees can also raise their hand as we move forward. So again, today's focus is really on the drought impacts analysis study. For those of you, just as a reminder, the Board of Supervisors approved a contract with Ludorf and Scalmanini to conduct a drought impact analysis study focusing on last year's 2021. And just the purpose of the study was to evaluate and understand the impacts of drought conditions in that water year. So a presentation of the content of the drought impact study was given to the board in April, and edits and additions were made per the board's input to the study. And the final study was released in mid-May with a public webinar conducted on June 1st. And then an overview of the document was provided to the Drought Task Force and the Water Commission in June, early June, for just discussion and perhaps potential recommendations from the Drought Task Force and the Water Commission that would go before the board. And so what we decided to do was compile a memo that outlined some of the topics that were discussed at those meetings, and then identify some recommendations primarily based on the next steps in the drought impact analysis study. So I thought I would just kind of review the memo, provide an overview, and then I will bring it up shortly when we get into the recommendations in that document. But what I did was we took the comments that were received from the Drought Task Force and the Water Commission and kind of grouped them into categories. Some of the topics that were brought up were already things that we were doing, so I wanted to kind of link those to some of those activities and then focus on the next steps and recommendations. So some of the items detailed in the memo are the current drought response activities that we are doing, including updating the drought webpage, And for those of you who haven't seen it, if you go to buttecounty.net/drought, there's specific information. It serves as a clearinghouse for drought information, and our department, the Department of Water and Resource Conservation, worked on that in collaboration with the OEM, Office of Emergency Management, with Director Jimmerfield's team. And so that has been updated, and there's a bunch of resources on that webpage. We also have the Drought Assistance Program that OEM had received about $1.16 million from DWR, the Department of Water Resources, for local drought response. And that includes kind of three components: an emergency water filling station, and OEM is working with Cal Water putting together that filling station. There's also a potable water delivery for homes that have storage tanks, and then temporary water storage tanks at homes without them. So that is some of our current drought response activity. And then I also, in the memo, it also discusses our drought preparedness and mitigation plan, or the drought plan, which was adopted back in 2004. And so that document does have some monitoring and reporting kind of criteria that we've been looking at. We have been reporting on hydrologic conditions throughout this water year, as well as well permits that have been issued, especially those associated with drought. And we've been providing drought updates to the Board of Supervisors, and hopefully we'll get a little more detailed and regular with those updates to the board. The memo also talks about Senate Bill 552, which was passed back in September of last year, which is the drought planning for small water suppliers in rural communities. There are some requirements that are specific to the county in that legislation, which includes the establishment of a drought and water shortage task force, and developing a plan for drought and water shortage. And so the county, because of this drought task force and because of our drought plan, comply with those requirements. However, there are a few additional details that need to be included in the drought plan to fully comply with SB 552, which are specific discussions pertaining to small water systems and domestic wells. So those are some of the things there. Also, some of the topics that were brought up at the Drought Task Force and Water Commission meetings by both Drought Task Force members, commissioners, as well as the public. Some of those items are things that already fall within the activities of the Department of Water and Resource Conservation. So in the memo, we've listed those, and we anticipate that many of those activities are things that we already do, such as community outreach and different the IRWM and engaging with the groundwater sustainability agencies. So we'll just continue to perform those activities moving forward. Also, there were a number of items talking about that are associated with implementation of the groundwater sustainability plans. And currently we're working on identifying data gaps and refining projects and management actions that were identified in the GSPs, or the groundwater sustainability plans. And so some of the topics that were identified, including water use efficiency, flood MAR activities, groundwater dependent ecosystems, those topics were kind of folded into the activities of the GSAs and the GSPs. And so wanting to really have the recommendations to the board focus on additional things that need to be done specifically related to drought. So with that in mind, I'll ask if there's any questions from the panelists, clarifications about the first half of the memo at this point. Not seeing, nobody wants to turn off. Kelly, did you turn off your?
I can hear you, but I don't have any additions.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Josh.
Hey, Kimi, this is Josh. The one thing that I'll mention on that is that this afternoon, after this meeting, actually, We have the first DWR Community Drought Plan Workshop, and I'll be a part of that. And
Oh,
just that our
yeah.
two departments are kind of cooperating on that. And the intent behind that is to take our older drought response plan and bring it up to date and make sure that it's in compliance with any of those additional requirements out of the SB 552. So that'll be happening, and that'll be something that we'll collaborate on for the updates to the board as we move ahead into the drought task force as well.
Right. I forgot that you volunteered us for that. But
Yes,
I'm
I
glad
did.
you're taking the lead. You have to love it when a director says, I volunteered us for this. Great. So I'm hoping that you guys can see a screen that doesn't show my pictures from Hawaii, but my memo. Is that what's showing up?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, and hopefully you can read it. I can zoom in a little more. I just see my big screen. So, the first recommendation is with regard to the drought plan updates. Like I said, the drought plan was prepared back in 2004. It has a lot of great information. It was involved a lot of public outreach, but at this point, the drought plan should be revised to incorporate, I think, in existing county processes and responses to drought, because we have done some activities this year and in previous years to respond to drought. So we might want to incorporate that information, but also in the drought study, some of the next steps also included the development of some matrix that monitor and report on drought and water shortage risks for small water systems and domestic water users, identifying some data gaps to develop strategies and metrics or tools that provide better information to water managers in a timely manner, and again, incorporate some of the county's processes and responses to drought. They're listed here as the whole recommendation. I'm thinking the best way to go through this is if there's any significant changes, or if this potential recommendation kind of works for the drought task force. I'm not hearing. Okay. And oh, I saw a hand, or it's somebody that went down. Okay. And then maybe taking it recommendation by recommendation, if there's anyone from the public who has any thoughts. Mr. Brobeck. Jim. Hopefully.
There we
Yes.
go.
There you go.
On the bullet point 2, identify data gaps and develop strategies, metrics, tools. It looks like maybe in table 7, we're going to see some, I really want to see specific data gaps identified and strategies to ameliorate them. Of great concern to me when I look at this drought impact study, and I look at the 2004 to 2019 deep aquifer declines that occurred during the summer. It's in a DWR map near the end, and it's clear to me that impacts associated with the extreme declines in Glenn County are reaching over into Butte County. And we still do not have any kind of modeling or sufficient monitoring to identify cross basin flows. And as the political and local urge to attempt to do groundwater recharge and even groundwater efficiency, that all these efforts on this side may end up just leaking across the boundary, if not this year, then over the course of the next few years, since we know the experts tell us that it takes years sometimes for the impacts to occur, and years for the impacts to decline after pumping even stops. So these big groundwater holes on the other side of the river are of just great concern to many of us here in Butte County. And I would like to see specific recommendations on how to fill these data gaps to better understand the hydrology of cross basin flows. And to do it as soon as possible. It's my opinion that this was a prerequisite for making our GSPs. And I know it's been something that's been promised for years, and it just hasn't materialized. That and also the groundwater dependent ecosystem monitoring, the shallow aquifer monitoring. Those two data gaps are of the utmost concern, and should have been completed prior to creating our plans, our GSPs. And so the sooner we do them, of course, the better.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And I'll just say that in the memo, it does talk about and specifically does identify some of the GDE and even the urban tree canopy as projects, potential projects for the GSP implementation. So it's kind of grouped in that category. I think as we update the drought plan, the things that might have a crossover in relation to drought would be pulled over into the drought plan. Table 7-3 in the drought impact analysis study does list some existing data sets and does provide some recommendations of the data gaps that could be provided or should be included in the drought plan updates, and what that looks like in the future. I'm not sure, but it is something, again, it would be a recommendation to the board that we update the plan, as funding becomes available. So thanks. Any other comments from the public? All right. So I'm going to just say, I think this one's a go. I'm going to scroll down, close your eyes so you don't get sick. So the drought plan does include next steps in its recommendations that could be forwarded on to the Board of Supervisors. The categories are risk assessment by assessing drought risks for user and type of use, drought response metrics, kind of going back a little bit to the data gaps, pursuing funding opportunities, and even a domestic well replacement program, as well as future reporting and data needs. So with regard to risk assessment, there were some items that were identified in the drought impact analysis study. And then the recommendation here is to identify screening tools, including the use of DWR dashboards to assess drought and water shortage vulnerability for small water systems and self-supplied systems such as domestic well users. Evaluations would include both agricultural and domestic well vulnerability, incorporate a risk assessment discussion into the drought plan, and include a potential drought risk discussion as part of the department's annual groundwater status report to the Board of Supervisors per Chapter 33. So as you all know, we do prepare a groundwater status report to the board, and kind of creating a little bit of a link between groundwater management of the GSPs, because they are required to provide annual reports, but also relating it to kind of the immediate drought response in years of dry and critically dry years and drought years. So, and I will welcome Christina or Kelly to jump in at any time when it comes to all this technical stuff too. So, all right. Any thoughts from our panelists from the Drought Task Force? And then anyone from attendees? Okay. I'm going to move on then. So drought response matrix in, again, the drought study has a doing metrics, not matrix, metrics, as suggests having some metrics based on data and observations from previous drought cycles. This recommendation is develop and incorporate into the drought plan drought response metrics that establish risk thresholds that trigger actions to be taken in critically dry or multiple dry year drought events. Identify specific actions that would be taken to reduce drought risks. Metrics should be developed demarcating between the valley and foothill areas and potentially have different metrics for these areas for assessing drought risk. Identify appropriate drought mitigation as well. So, any thoughts, comments from the Drought Task Force? And anyone from the public, the attendees? Okay, you guys are making this easy. All right, the next one is drought funding opportunities. Obviously this year with the drought, there are lots of funding opportunities, and we've been pursuing them in different departments of the county. And like I said, OEM did receive the $1.16 million grant. We've also received some grants for some small community water system projects like the Palermo project that we have going. So this recommendation is to continue to pursue outside grant funding opportunities and leverage outside funding sources to update key drought policy and management objectives and prepare a comprehensive update of the drought plan. I do know that with SB 552, there'll be some guidelines coming out and being developed. I think that's part of even what Director Jimmerfield has volunteered himself for, us for helping, but then also some funding opportunities for the preparation of plans. So any comments or thoughts from the panelists from our Drought Task Force?
I would just comment, Kami, that we continue to seek out through OEM any kind of emergency funding possibilities. So anything that'll help us continue to support or expand on the water hauling program. We're also in collaboration with the California Emergency Services Association. So if there's other programs that we haven't thought of that maybe another county is working on that seem like they'd be a fit here for Butte, we've kind of got our eyeballs out there, hoping that maybe we can grab something else that might help residents in the county. In addition, we are in discussions with DWR. If there's more funding available through this same program, it looks like that's a distinct possibility that Department of Water Resources would continue to fund this program. If we have a program continuation or extending the funding of that, is my understanding at the top of the priority list. So that's a good thing that we're in and have part of this going, because we would be first to get additional funds to continue the program. So we'll keep updates on that as things move along. But as I said, we'll keep our eyes out for more funding opportunities for any kind of emergency water relief.
Great. And there is, next step is a countywide and regional funding program for small water system and domestic well replacement program, which I'll mention shortly. But yes, there's lots of opportunities out there. Any attendees, anyone from the public who have any comments? Okay. And moving on to, so a domestic well replacement program. Like I said, there is a countywide of funding available called the Countywide and Regional Funding Program in 2022, which is to fund small system and domestic well replacement program to mitigate some of the impacts felt by small well users during this drought. I will note that the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, the VINA GSA and the GSP does have a program that's outlined in the GSP for domestic well mitigation. So as we start developing projects, we'll see where that particular project could potentially go. Again, that would be for wells within the VINA subbasins there, which is different obviously than the foothills, which may have its own, obviously they have their own issues. I think a lot of the wells that have been impacted by drought fall within the foothill area. So this is just a description of the VINA GSP program here. And I guess this is an item for discussion, questions. If the county should develop a domestic well mitigation program for inclusion in the drought plan and or the GSPs. So I put that out there. If anyone has thoughts, questions from the drought task force of what that would potentially look like. I do know that the drought study, I don't have it in front of me, did identify, areas, vulnerable areas for domestic well users. A lot of them were primarily in the VINA subbasin. The drought impact study, and Christina, remind me, it also identified, talked about areas within the foothills too. So. And again, we've been tracking the number of wells that are impacted by drought as well.
Cami, this is Christina.
Yeah.
So as part of this recommendation or discussion, I guess, the potential to recommend that we pursue that funding opportunity that you mentioned, it's just off the screen, whatever, it's long name, but
I know the long name.
Yeah. That we're looking for discussion by the drought task force or input on whether that's something, that we should try to pursue to develop a program, pursue funding in order to develop a program like this.
Yeah, it would be great. I mean, because the funding is out there, but we haven't had any discussion as to whether that's something that we should be pursuing or not, and what that kind of program would even look like. So.
Yeah.
You have a hand raised.
Oh, great.
Dawson.
Okay. Anne?
Hi.
Hi.
I would just like to say that I'm concerned that domestic wells that fall under the disadvantaged community low income category, I'm sure there's going to be funding made available for those, but I feel that within the VINA subbasin, domestic well owners are being penalized for groundwater level reductions because we're not so far being offered anything to help us offset the financial costs incurred. I know there's not been too many dry wells yet in the VINA subbasin, but I'm sure they're coming. And I just would like to see us remember about costs to domestic well owners who do not fall into the low income category. Replacing a well is a very expensive proposition, and I don't think we should be bearing the burden for the rest of the stakeholders in the VINA subbasin. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So I think at this point, not hearing much about perhaps pursuing funding or looking into it a little more, which I guess we could do that and see what the requirements are and what the program could potentially look like. And knowing that also we do have the groundwater sustainability project process, and that could be identified more from the stakeholder level, like Anne had just talked about, and what that would look like. I also think we've talked internally that there could be more outreach for domestic well owners and I think we've included some of this type of information on our website. Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, about domestic wells and different resources for domestic well owners.
Yeah, no, that's right, Cami. And I'll just add too that so far this week I've been spending quite a good deal of time reaching out to landowners who have filled out those dry well reports to the state. And while a number of them are within the subbasins, and this type of program, if implemented through a GSP, could benefit those, there are still a number of individuals that I've been talking to, at least this week, that do live outside of the subbasins and are in need of the programs that we're currently offering, which are some of the water hauling programs and the temporary tank programs, but also more of a long-term solution as well too. So I would say, just from my experience, at least this week, and the outreach to the 25 folks that I've spoken to, there does seem to be a strong need for additional resources and help to those well owners outside of the subbasins.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Okay, so perhaps I think maybe we'll look into the program a little more and be able to at least address some of the needs for those up in the foothills as well, and see what the demographics of those users are, and hopefully they might be able to take advantage of a program and see where the Board of Supervisors sits with that as well. Okay, and let's see, scrolling down to the next, future reporting and data needs. These topics were raised by the Drought Task Force and the Water Commission, as well as the public. So the item for discussion is, should the county fund and prepare the drought impact study for subsequent future drought years, or some variation of the drought study, perhaps some of the information that is pertinent and for decision making. But if we do pursue future drought studies, what should the scope of that include? And then the potential recommendation is the data and metrics to track and report drought conditions to the Board of Supervisors during wet, dry, and drought water years should be defined in an update to the drought plan using the drought study as a guide. So I do know that it has been suggested that perhaps we do a drought study again, perhaps for this year. Do we need to do a full complete study, or just really updating the information that's in the drought study? So there's we can do some comparative analysis from year to year. Any thoughts?
And this is Christina. I'll just add too that now with, at least in the valley areas, with Sigma being implemented by our subbasins in Butte County and our neighboring subbasins, some of the work that was done as part of the drought impact study will show up in annual reports by these subbasins. And so that includes, water budget estimates for groundwater use per sector. So, and also surface water. So some of that work will be done by others and will be accessible. And really that was a good chunk of effort and money spent on this report, was those sections that developed those water budget numbers.
Thanks, Christina. Does anyone from the public have any comments or thoughts about what types of things should be included in a future study if done, or if the information from the annual reports could suffice? Jim, I see your hand up.
Yes. The study graphed the ratio of rice to orchard agriculture in Butte County. I believe that future studies should have graph out the shifting ratio of rice and grazing land to orchards in our neighboring counties that are tapping the shared aquifer, especially in Glenn County, where there's really been an explosion of development in the deepest portion of the aquifer system. as well as a ramp up of their supplemental groundwater pumping programs over there. So what was done in this one to graph out the rice orchard agriculture acreage in Butte County, that should be expanded to understand what's happening over all portions of the shared aquifer. I don't know if this would be part of an actual study, but I'm aware that in the San Joaquin Valley, when the wells were developed down there, the effectiveness of the confining beds within the aquifer was compromised when wells drilled with casings perforated for much of their length. And this allowed for virtually unrestricted vertical flow through the well bore. And once you dewater the lower aquifer, the upper aquifer just drains into the well screens, into the dewatered lower aquifer. And that'll really have an impact on the domestic wells and the historic agricultural wells that are not 500 feet to 1,000 feet down there. According to the USGS, the amount of water that flows downward through one large diameter well has been estimated to be the equivalent to the natural leakage through the confining layer over an area of approximately 7 square miles. One well drains the natural leakage of 7 square miles. So it's really important that we start considering how well casing perforations can have an impact on the downward flow of water as the lower aquifer continues to drop, and the lower aquifer will continue to drop during these drought conditions as replenishment is reduced and extractions are increased. So well design is really an important consideration for Butte County to consider, and possibly for the drought impact study to analyze and make recommendations on.
Great, thank you, Jim. I will note that, and it's in the memo as well, that the county does plan on updating its well ordinance, probably starting sometime within the next year. I think the county has been waiting for, oh, Nick, you're gonna have to tell me what it is, that DWR and their updates to well stuff. I know it gets folded
California
in.
water well standards, yeah.
Yeah, and it gets folded into that. So so there might be an opportunity to look at well design.
Is there someone on this call that knows if these kind of well construction recommendations have been implemented anywhere in the state to isolate the different layers by making sure that they're only screened at a single layer so that it doesn't connect all the layers through these really deep boreholes?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, let me, I don't know if you can see me, but
Yes, we can see you.
hi, Jim. So my name is Nick. I'm with Butte County Environmental Health, the land use program manager. So we oversee the water well construction, permit that activity. I can't speak for county-wide because we all do have our own water well ordinances, but all of our ordinances, and including our Butte County's, all tie back to the California water well standards, which can be pointed out are being currently, or they're currently in revision and are right now on track to be final probably before the end of the year. So those revisions are accounting for some of the more current drought concerns and reviewing any additional requirements for well construction. But current standards do address wells that penetrate multiple water stratas or aquifers, and there are provisions in there to seal off those stratas. So that is something that we do have some authority over, and something that we can certainly be looking into right now. But with the updated standards, we should have more kind of expansive, if not authority, then overview or options or yeah, I guess options to require that kind of well design essentially.
Nick, you mentioned that the state is updating the well construction standards. Is there a way for the public to get engaged in that process that you're aware of?
Yes, my understanding is I think it's still open to public comment and involvements. I will, if I can get your, or if we can collect your contact information, if you want to share that, I'm more than happy to follow up after this meeting and share that with you.
We can get that.
Okay, thank you, Cami.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll
Appreciate
send
that.
him your information, Jim. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Cami. Thank you. Alrighty.
All right. So with that last recommendation, I think obviously with doing some data and metrics to track, perhaps including some information from the drought impact study that might be pertinent for future decision making, and we can get the Water Commission and then input on that and see what we forward on to the Board of Supervisors. So with that, that's kind of the end of the recommendations that we identified. I don't know if there's anything that anyone else would like to add to that. Things that we totally missed. Just as a process review, so we have the Drought Task Force. We'll take this same memo. It has gone to or is going to the Water Commission, and they meet on Wednesday. What day is that? The 6th, and they'll be discussing this topic as well. And then any changes or additional recommendations, this memo would be updated for the Board of Supervisors for their consideration at their July 26th meeting. So that's what happens next.
Jim has his hand raised again.
Oh, sure. Yes, Jim. Thank you.
I'm concerned that most planning documents that I read give some lip service to climate change, which is absolutely important. But the expanding mega drought that started 22 years ago in the Southwest in Arizona, New Mexico, it seems to be expanding. And the paleoclimatological record indicates that this is a phenomena that does occur periodically every 700 to 1,000 years. And we're talking about not just a drought, but an actual change in the climate. What we consider a drought, like we've had in the past 2 or 3 years, may persist for decades with an occasional downpour here and there. But and so I think it's really important for us to use that perspective when we look at when we're looking at climate change. Of course, climate change exacerbates naturally occurring cycles because the increase in temperature that's associated with climate change, with carbon in the atmosphere. But difficult as it may be to imagine what our aquifer might look like under sustained drought or sustained conditions like we're experiencing this year and last year. I think this is a consideration that we really need to include in future analysis and be ready for. We may be at the beginning of an entirely different climate that California infrastructure was not built to endure or to recognize.
Thank you, Jim. I think too, is from a GSP perspective, I think as we go through the updates to the groundwater sustainability plans, which do kind of address some climate change modeling, that those plans would address climate change and any updates or things that need to occur based on the conditions that we're actually seeing. So those 5-year updates will likely include an analysis of that. So
well, that's my point, is the climate change scenarios and modeling that I've examined under the VINA plan did not really include multi-decade drought.
right. Yeah,
They focused on more periodic drought and temperature increases, but they didn't look at an entire shift in the climate as naturally occurs and appears to be spreading throughout the West. So it's important to start really considering that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know if waiting 5 years is sufficient. Thanks, Cami.
Thank you, Jim, for your comments. Very appreciated. Anyone else from the public have any comments?
We have
All
no
right.
hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Autumn. With that, looking at our agenda, other reports and updates, I kind of put all for anyone on the Drought Task Force. If your department or agency has any drought report updates, speak now. Okay. Go ahead.
Cami, if you'd like, this is Nick.
Yes.
I don't really have a huge update, but I just wanted to kind of maybe, if you'd like, give a quick overview of our executive order and the water well process implementation and a little bit of
Yeah, that'd be
information
great.
there if interested.
Mhm, that would be great.
Okay.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I'll just do that real quick. I presented this information at our development services users group as well. And I suppose the more that hear this, the better. We do have our new water well process that's been put in place starting June 7th, 2022, so just a few weeks ago. And that was in partnership with Cami's team, Butte County Water and Resource Conservation and County Council, Administration and Development Services, other partners too. So that essentially has resumed our well processing and issuance review process. We had some permits on hold. All those permits have now been moving forward. All those contacts have been notified. We've had about 5 permits since that date that are subject to the executive order and the new review process. We have about 18 well permits in total that are subject to the order currently. So that's, but those are moving forward without any issues that I can report on. Other than that, we also our website has funding opportunities, and we try to make sure to post those same grants or federal or state funding opportunities on our site that Cami's team and probably Josh's team also do. We don't have, unfortunately, aren't usually involved in the application process. We normally don't assist applicants with that process, but we're more than happy to direct them to those resources, definitely. Again, just a reminder, our office is primarily focused on water well permit issuance and those types of activities. So we try to partner with those departments that do actually work with grants, funding, and all that as best as we can. Otherwise, that's all I have. And we are going to be posting or releasing our Q3, so water year Q3 water well permit data here shortly. We're waiting for the end of this month, which is, I guess that's today. In case we get any other wells in, but starting next week, we're going to be completing that water well report. So that should be completed sometime next week. So we can share that at the next Drought Task Force.
Perfect. Good. Anyone else? I do see a couple hands raised. Bill Ehorn, maybe introduce yourself, Bill, and what agency you're with if you're representing it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I've had microphone problems all along here, but I'm Bill Ehorn, and I'm a geologist in the Northern Region Office for the Department of Water Resources and the Drought Coordinator. So I try and listen in and participate when I can in all the county drought task force meetings. And so just a couple quick comments, and one's going back to Jim's comment on the well screen issue. And so I wanted to say that Glenn County is redoing their well ordinance, and they're going to have requirements in there for ag wells to be screened, a certain interval below the domestic. So that is happening in the neighboring county. And then I had one other quick question, just going, or not question, but comment going through the memo on the screen. Fallowing's not mentioned at all, and I don't know if that's something you want to consider for a cost benefit, something rather on this. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks,
Yep.
Bill. All right. Oh, I'm going to go in order of people, the hands raised. So Jim, and then Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
Bill, that's some very interesting, excellent news coming out of Glenn County. I have a question for Nick on these 17 wells. Are these all large diameter wells? What's the location of the wells generally? Are they in the Vina district? And as specific as possible is of interest to the public. And when they take out a permit, do they have an idea of what the well construction is going to be as far as depth and screen intervals? Or is that determined as the contractor drills the well?
Yes, so let me and so some of the questions you're asking, that's something I'll be working on including in our Q3 water well permit report. So I'll have a lot more specifics there. Just in generalities, and I'm going to try to pull up some of these numbers here as I'm talking to you. Yes, they are primarily large diameter wells, which coincidentally are also primarily ag-related, so irrigation wells. As far as location, they seem to be kind of scattered throughout. Let me see if I can give you just some, give me a second here. Maybe some specifics. Let me see, so GSAs. Yeah, so we seem to have, it's kind of, they kind of throughout the county. So we have some within Wyandotte, Vina, and they all seem to be kind of equally spread. Butte Water Districts, Butte County, Biggs West. So it seems to be kind of a equal balance right now. But I'll have those numbers, those specifics, and we can report those at the next drought task force. So if you stay tuned, there'll be more data to come.
And I'm wondering if they're being developed to irrigate currently unirrigated land, or if these are replacement wells. In other words,
Sure.
Are we expanding the irrigated footprint in Butte County with these wells?
So you're asking if there being new wells being put in to irrigate lands that were previously unirrigated. And I don't think that's the case, but I think also as part of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, part of the information that you're gathering when people are getting well permits is, one, is it drought related? And two, well permits are also required for not only new wells, but certain fixes within the wells and deepening and whatever else, right?
Yeah. So that's something that, right. So that's something that our report also covers, is any kind of deepenings, repairs, destructions. So that's something that we do track. I can't speak to these 18, the specifics right now, but that's something that we'll certainly have information on with the Q3 report. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
And one last question. Are the location associated with irrigation districts, water districts that are looking for groundwater to supplement their surface water supply?
Was that, I'm not sure if I understood. Say that again, Jim.
I'm curious to know, one of my questions was, are these wells located in areas that are not being currently irrigated? In other words, grazing land, and my second question is, are they located within the footprint of land that's served by surface water? to provide supplemental water supplies for people that are currently on surface water, that are looking for an ability to endure drought when they have cutbacks like
Right.
we did this year.
If that's the question you have for me, that's definitely beyond the scope of our program here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's something that's, yeah, we normally, we're not mandated to monitor any of this. So it's already, we're trying to kind of, we're trying to implement these data fields as best we can to serve the public, obviously, in this drought task force. But yeah, this particular question is one that we're not currently tracking.
Thank you, Nick. Kelly, I see your hands raised, so I'm thinking you might have something to add to this topic.
Yes,
Or-
I do.
okay.
And not to answer those specific questions, Jim, like Nick said, I think that is a bit outside of the scope of what we're all doing here at the moment. But of the wells or the well applications that I've reviewed, only one has been in the VINA GSA.
And just as a side note, I do think that one of the things that we will be reporting or giving to the GSAs, and particularly even in the Butte subbasin, is that because we are tracking which GSA the well is being installed in, we will be providing that GSA with the information that X number of wells were installed, let's say, in the Western Canal GSA. And so we'll also be reporting, for example, how many wells have been installed in the VINA GSA or Wyandotte Creek GSA. All right, I'm going to go over to our public people and Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
All right, Cami, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I had two quick questions. I see on my colleague's Facebook page, Deborah Lucero, she has a map of where the dry wells are. I just wondered if that's something that's available to everybody. It's very interesting to see where the dry wells are, mostly in the foothills. And like you said, maybe one or two in the VINA GSA area. And then secondly, is there a website from Department of Water Resources that shows the standing water levels from monitoring wells in Butte County? I get questions from my constituents wanting to know if there's a way or a mechanism that shows the standing water levels or the water levels in certain parts of the county.
Great. I'm gonna turn it over to Kelly because I think she's gonna be able to answer that.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, Todd, those are great questions. And one website actually handles all of that. It's the DWR's California Groundwater Live website. So there's a couple of really neat functions in there. And you can actually dig into the data a little bit more and get into those hydrographs and that will show you the standing water levels. It's pretty navigable. You can zoom into your area of interest in your neighborhood. I'm happy to work with you offline and show you a tour of that if you'd like. And that website also does include the map of the dry well reports that are submitted to WR as well.
Great.
So I'm
Thanks.
happy to dig through that. Sure thing.
Thank you very much, and I'll contact you when we're done here to get that information. Thanks a lot.
Okay. And Kelly, maybe you could throw the website link in the chat. Do we have chat? No, we don't have chat. Okay, never mind. Okay. And Josh, I see your hand raised. And then Supervisor Lucero, I see your hand raised as well. So we'll go after Josh adds.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in, I shared a map based on the dry well applications we've been receiving for the water hauling program with Supervisor Lucero. That also shows some of those locations. Right now, that's just a screenshot. I'm working with our IS support to pull out the metadata so that you can't see, you know, homeowners information that's tied to the dots on that map. And ideally, we can get that linked in, and we're going to be providing that data over to DWR as well. So those dots should populate on DWR's map and be a complete picture of both those folks within our county that are applying for the dry wells that may or may not have submitted their information to DWR for the dry well. And we're trying to make sure there's no crossover on those, so that map should be complete. But there may be a little bit of discrepancy while we iron out those details. Just wanted to make sure that that was known to everyone.
Thank you. Great. I'm going to go back over to our Supervisor Lucero.
Thank you. And thanks, Josh. That was really helpful information, and thanks for providing all the information you provided this week. I just was curious, follow up on Nick's comments regarding what is required to report on and what we are reporting on. And my question ties back to some of Jim's comments and just in general. If we are going to be providing to the public, say, we have 17 new wells, I think it's important to put those wells into context. What type of wells they are they replacement wells? Are they new wells? You know, what basin they're in? You know, we should have more rather than less. If we just say 17 wells, that isn't very helpful, I don't think. So I'm just wondering, A, how we might present that, and then B, based on Nick's comments, what are the things that are being required of the county for the drought analysis, or not a drought analysis plan, but the drought mitigation plans that I know every county has to provide? Is there criteria available somewhere that you can post?
I can share with, I can post what is in SB 552. And there's only a couple of things that are applicable to the county specifically, and much of the requirements in SB 552 are for water suppliers. So of varying sizes. So there's, you know, certain water supply purveyors that are over 3,000 connections, and they have their urban water management plans and things like that. For SB 552, it kind of addresses everyone, the water providers up to 3,000 connections. Historically, they haven't had to have the same requirements like drought resiliency and water shortage contingency plans. And so what SB 552 does is kind of fills that gap. So I can share with you those requirements. And then there's just a couple of things, additional things for the county. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. So basically, this would be all small suppliers of water. Would this include irrigation districts?
Irrigation, not necessarily, because it's more for public water systems for primarily for drinking water. Although irrigation districts, and anyone can pipe in, Christina, do have like ag water management plans. Some irrigation districts, like Durham Irrigation District is a good example, that does provide public or water for drinking water. They'll have to comply because they do have to report to the state. So there will be things that they have to comply with. But yeah, so I think there are a few differences, but
and then just to follow up on that is, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we as the public understand the full water picture when everything is so divided up? Like, well, this applies only to this group of people and this applies only to this group of people. Is that captured in the GSAs then?
I think I don't know how to specifically answer that. I think it is very divided because of just water providers are responsible for who they give water to. Yeah.
I can weigh in here just in terms, again, the annual reports require estimates of both groundwater supply per sector, so irrigation, drinking, and also surface water, municipal, industrial, and as well as irrigation, ag. So those, I mean, I think those annual reports are going to be kind of a landmine of information and a great new resource. But yeah, I mean, I think the difficult part about water is it's very decentralized, right? So it's hard to get the big picture all in one place.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
And Supervisor Kimmelshue, I see your hand is up again. I don't know if it was an old hand or a new hand.
Maybe an old hand.
Maybe an old hand.
So
Okay.
real quick, just to circle back for clarification, so we're really clear, there are no kind of county reporting requirements at this point, right? For coming from the state.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was understood.
Okay. And Todd, I'm going to assume that's an old hand. Your microphone is, you're on me. Oh, there.
Okay, here I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just left for a minute. What,
Okay.
get a
Well,
question?
I saw
Question?
that your hand was up, so we weren't sure if
Yeah,
you're
just one more thing.
Okay.
I know Kelly's gonna send me that link to the DWR site that shows water levels. I really think that ought to be predominantly displayed on our drought webpage. Okay. I mean, this is going to sound silly, but it's kind of like me clicking on to see what the stocks are doing that day. You know, I think it would be important for someone to click on and see, hey, what's the water level in my area? So, you know, anything that could be said, say, hey, you know, something like, want to see what your water level is in your neighborhood? Click here, type of thing. I know that sounds really corny, but I think that would be helpful to people on domestic wells as well as ag wells.
Great, thank you. I think some of the things that were suggested in the drought study, including the data and the metrics, included the use of dashboards. So, you know, right now I think we're really relying on DWR's dashboards, and so hopefully making those much more accessible, and they're pretty user friendly once you get in there the first time. So, but yeah, we can get some information up there and available. All right, great discussion. I don't see any more hands raised, so thank you. I don't even know where we are on the agenda. That was all other, that was still under other reports and updates, but is there anything else the public wants to address the drought task force with, of things not on the agenda? Okay. And so our next meeting is the third Wednesday of the month. So we're trying to have at least dates on the calendar. If we don't have items to speak of, we'll cancel. But I think this being a drought year, we'll continue to plan on monthly meetings at this time. And so it's the third Wednesday of the month. So it'll be July 21st at 1 to 3. Today's meeting was just via Zoom because we had just met a couple weeks ago and wanting the it to be convenient for everyone to attend and really focus on the drought impacts analysis study recommendations. So I appreciate everyone participating in that. But next, our meeting next month on the 21st will have an in-person and remote option, but we'll be meeting in the supervisors chambers, and hopefully you can join us there. Otherwise, we will have a Zoom link for the task force and the public as well. So with that, we'll see you all soon.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.